The topic of today is driving demand, door-to-door outreach, and tracking impacts. We have a really wonderful set of panelists today. My name is Marion Fuller, and I work with Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, and I'm one of the technical assistance providers for the Department of Energy. So I just want to spend a couple minutes first talking about the Technical Assistance Program. It is a free program available to stimulus-funded cities and states and other local governments, particularly the block grant program and the state energy program funds. Any local government who's using those funds to set up energy-related programs can request technical assistance from the Department of Energy. We do one-on-one assistance, webinars such as this one, various events. We have a blog. We have online best practices. We do some in-person peer exchange meetings. And we do this technical assistance on a variety of topics, energy efficiency and renewable energy technologies, program design, financing, performance contracting, state, a whole range of things. And there's
Marion. Marion, we cannot hear you.
Hi there. I'm sorry. This is Marion Fuller. I think my phone went out for whatever reason, but I'm going to start over. We are offering this webinar on, on door-to-door outreach and tracking metrics for energy efficiency programs. I think my phone went out before I was able to talk about the technical assistance that is available to grantees. You're able to get technical assistance on a variety of topics, including energy efficiency, program design, financing, performance contracting, state and local capacity building, a number of topics that grantees who are receiving stimulus dollars to run state and local programs are currently dealing with. There are a host of experts able to support you in those needs. This is a quick slide on how to apply for those services. You can go online, you can submit a request, you can also call the number on your screen or email solutioncenter@ee.doe.gov. So we have a great lineup of speakers today. What we'll do is all the folks who are on the line listening to the webinar, you can type in questions and you're able to, I'll be seeing those on the screen and I'll be responding to those or asking them directly to the panelists as they speak. So Our presenters today, we have David Gershon, who's the founder and CEO of the Empowerment Institute. He's one of the authorities on behavior change and large system transformation. He'll be talking first about some of his direct experience on the ground with these programs. We also have Alex Lawson, who's the Managing Director of DC Project. He has years of experience working with political campaigns to get out the vote and to really organize and motivate people, and he'll be talking about that campaign organizing experience. We have Gabrielle Stebbins from Efficiency Vermont, who is an implementation specialist for residential efficiency services. She's also the co-coordinator of the Vermont Community Energy Mobilization Project, and she'll be talking about that project today. And finally, we have Max Harper, who's the program director of the DC Project. He'll be talking about some of the metrics to think about as you design programs to figure out what's working and what's not, how to track success, how to figure out which of the strategies that you're trying works better than other strategies. Has done some really great thinking about that. So we're excited to listen to hear all these speakers today. Just so you know, a lot of this webinar is based on a report that LBL recently put out called Driving Demand for Home Energy Improvements. And we have case studies of the DC Project and Gabrielle's program, the Vermont Community Energy Mobilization Project, in that report. David Gershon's work is also featured in there. If you're interested in that report or future webinars or a listserv we have for both an announcement listserv that's kind of a low volume listserv for folks interested in the topic, and also a discussion group for practitioners, you can sign up and get those resources at drivingdemand.lbl.gov. So I will go straight into David. David, can you hear? Or can you?
I can hear you, yes.
Great, thanks. Go for it.
So thank you, Marion, and thank you everyone for attending this call and for all the good work that you're doing. So what I want to speak about is how to actually engage people to adopt an environmentally sustainable lifestyle practice and how to get a lot of people to do that, effectively what it is we're talking about, through a program that we have built and have been running now for the past 20 years. And it builds on our research in two key areas: how to actually get people to change behavior and how to get a lot of people to do that. There are 5 design principles. Marion, if you could move to the next slide. Marion, thank you. So there are 5 design principles, and what I want to do is I want to lay out first the design principles, the framework, if you will, about why this works and how it works, and then I'll go into a case study on our program and the results we achieved. Next slide, please. The first principle we call empower, or the ability to get people to voluntarily adopt a new behavior. And I'm going to run through these quickly. They'll be available to you if you want to go back, but I just want to give you the background, if you will, that what's in the black box that allows the result to be achieved. The next slide. So in the work of empowerment, the core is being able to change behavior. And this is the challenge of all of these programs, not only in this space, but in lots of spaces, including corporations and many other pro-social issues that we need to get people to adopt. We've built a framework, the next slide please, that we call the empowerment framework. And that empowerment framework basically, while I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail, it has one core idea, and that is to move people to a compelling vision, a vision that attracts them, that excites them, that energizes them to want to do something. The more compelling the vision, the more powerful the ability to engage people. Next slide. So along with empowerment, the next thing we have to look at is how to invent possibilities that do not currently exist, or solutions. So a lot of our work is about how to tap into social innovation, or the ability to meet an unmet need or address a social problem. Again, a core part of our work. The next slide, please. At the end of the day, what we've tried to do is not just create incremental change, but transformative change. Or how do you change the game? How do you get something to really happen so that you can have a big impact on a social issue? So again, a lot of our design is creating these kinds of transformative changes. And the next slide speaks to the ability to bring the whole system together. Probably the operative term for everything I'll be talking about is whole system solution, or a holistic approach, bringing people together, approaching them from a holistic point of view, bringing lots of different resources together so that you touch many different places within a person or within a community. The next slide, please. If you can't pay someone to change, ultimately, which all the research has indicated in behavioral economics, you have to empower them or motivate them to change from intrinsic reasons, or from a reason that is motivating them beyond just the external rewards or motivations. So you have to learn how to disseminate these kinds of solutions where people want to tell others about it. So the next slide, please. So the key here is to develop what we call a tipping point. And we'll move right on to the next slide. And the key to a tipping point is leveraging disproportionate influence. And the guy who's really done the most thinking on this is a guy named Everett Rogers out of Stanford University, who created a body of research called The Fusion of Innovation, and wrote a really profound book on this topic. And what he did basically is he said four types of people respond to an innovation. The first group he called early adopters. And by the way, this research was based on 1,500 case studies over 50 years. He said early adopters seek out the new and have a high tolerance for experimentation. What he found was that if you can get about 15%, that is to say 15% of the people on a block or 15% of the blocks in a neighborhood to participate in a social innovation, if the social innovation is capable of scaling, is designed replicably, and has the wherewithal to scale, you hit a tipping point where it begins to diffuse on its own momentum. What he basically said is you need to preach to the choir, and they will sing loud enough to bring everyone into the church. The traditional way of social change is don't preach to the choir. This is counter to that, and it's a foundational idea for how to be effective and elegant in your strategy. Next slide. So as we addressed the issue of helping Americans develop environmentally sustainable lifestyles, we found that there were four questions they were asking. Rather than creating a solution, what we were trying to do is find out what the criteria for the solution needed to be. Where do I start? Which are the important actions? How do I take them? And will it make a difference? And I could see that being applied explicitly to energy efficiency or sustainable living or any pro-social behavior you want to bring about in society. Next slide, please. So our job was to develop a scalable strategy that could transform these barriers and change behaviors. Next slide. So what we created in 1990 was a program we called the Green Living Handbook. Next slide. What we did in that program was we took the overwhelm of information and we broke it into 6 topic areas. Right at that point in time, there was 50 simple things to save the world and many variations on the theme of lists and checklists, and we've seen the same thing now around climate change. But with so much information, people didn't know where to go. So we broke it into 6 topic areas: reducing solid waste, water efficiency, energy efficiency, transportation efficiency, green purchasing, and then empowering others. If I act and no one else does, we don't get very far. We then learned that just creating information by itself doesn't get the job done, even though this is more coherent. And we learned how to create what we called recipes. We designed the actions into distinct recipes. First you do this, then you do this, then you do this. Anytime there wasn't a clear sequence, it was a barrier to action, and people would invoke the proverbial, I'll get around to it later, and never get around to it. So very critical to have the recipes. But that by itself did not win the day. What we found was the thing that most effectively helped people to take the actions was a peer support group. 5 to 8 households is a good size because it's small enough that people can engage. And what the peer support group did was it created peer pressure, peer motivation, and peer learning. Essential experience. When we had that piece, things began to happen. We then created self-directed meeting guides. We scripted them so people not familiar with running meetings could run with them. We created coaches who grew out of the program, and then we would train cities or nonprofits to run with this program. Next slide. What we experienced in this was that not only did the ECO team enable environmental behavior change, and I'll speak to the results, but the process of building this group created the strong social bonds and trust, and if you will, social capital that could be redeployed for many other issues. And it was the ECO team, as I'll speak to a little bit later on, that created the social connection that got people to actually say, this is a good thing to do. I'm going to prioritize my time and actually do it. And the teamwork was really what got people over the finish line. Next slide, please. So we have worked with this program in many, many different places, but in light of this call, one of the places we're now working is the city of San Antonio, who took this program on to work with employees to help them develop more sustainable lifestyles. And because of this call and knowing the interest in energy efficiency explicitly, which was only one of our goals, we began to track the impact on that section of our program. And what we found as we had already known, but we hadn't tracked it before, was that the team process was what got people to do this. And there were approximately 12 different behaviors in the energy section. 3 or 4 of them dealt with specifically retrofit type actions. And on this particular team, most of the people did it. And it was not difficult to get them to do it because they had all the ingredients: how to take the action, the local resources that were available, and the team support and the social norms that were created around that. Next slide, please. So this is another experience of a team. This was working with their local utility, CPS, which was giving out various types of support to do this, including access to some kinds of incentives. And again, the team went for it. And working with some 200 people, we found that at least a third of the team took the hardcore actions of retrofitting and investing in their homes beyond just the simple habit changes. Next slide, please. So these were some of the results that we achieved in our work, working with 20,000 households, 20,000 people, excuse me. And in the energy section, we were consistently able to get across that number about a 14% energy reduction. And these were some of the other co-benefits from the point of view of this program and the other resource issues within the community. And what we found was, because the program was holistic, we were able to actually get multiple partners and supporters because we were meeting many different issues that the community was trying to address. Next slide. So once we discovered we could change behavior at a substantive level, the next question was, is it sustained over time? There were 7 studies, and we found that from all the studies 2 years after the fact, the behaviors were sustained, and in fact new ones were added. Once people adopted these new behaviors, they stayed with them. Next slide, please. So the third question, and one that's very critical to this conversation, was how do you get enough people to participate? We tried to form eco teams in workplaces, in service clubs, in faith-based groups, in social networks, but one particular platform was particularly powerful, and that was the neighborhood, because of the notion of co-benefits. And here's where we start to look at intrinsic motivation and social connectivity together. The intrinsic is doing something for the sake of their children, the sense of purpose that that generates, getting to know their neighbors, a immediate social value above and beyond doing the right thing for the environment, and building a more livable neighborhood, a healthier and safer neighborhood. What we ultimately crafted was this statement. We did market testing, and this was the statement that was successfully able to produce the result that I'll speak to in a moment. Hi, I'm your neighbor from up the street. I'd like to invite you to a neighborhood gathering in my home this Thursday night, 7:30 to 9, sponsored by, and then it would be one of the cities that would work with us, sponsored, let's say, by the city of Portland, to learn how to better conserve resources for the sake of our children, to get to know our neighbors better, and to be able to create a healthier, safer neighborhood. Can you make it? 85% of the people, that is to say well into the late majority, were predisposed and said yes. Half came, and 75% who came to that informational meeting in their neighbor's home said they would join this 7-meeting program, which got us a recruitment rate of 25%. Next slide, please. So what we ultimately found was that we were able to hit a number of tipping points. We achieved full diffusion in numerous blocks in many neighborhoods. That is to say, we got into the late majority. The program got adopted in some 25 cities and hundreds of other neighborhoods. It's been out to some 21 countries and began to be accepted as a policy tool for many different local, state, and federal government agencies. And we began to diffuse the whole notion of sustainable living through lots of media outreach. Next slide. The media picked it up. The whole notion really started to have a popularization when it got in the New Yorker and other major media like this, where they took the key ideas of this program and began to, we knew we had hit some success when we saw this cartoon in the New Yorker. Next slide, please. So in the big picture, what we found was that we were able to achieve the following societal transformation outcomes. We began, because of, again, the holistic nature of this program, to help people move from city and citizen as adversaries to partners. I'm doing my part. I need your help to go further. That was the new mentality that we saw happening. From wasteful use of natural resources to sustainable lifestyles. When we began in 1990, that word was not in the vocabulary. As a result of some of this work, we began to popularize this notion of a sustainable lifestyle. And that's a key piece of this work, because approaching someone holistically to create a sustainable lifestyle is a lot easier sell than saying, will you have a more energy efficient house, or will you can you retrofit your house, or will you retrofit your house? When you approach people from the point of view of where they are, it's a lot easier to engage them. Thirdly, what we moved people from was isolated and somewhat alienated in their block, not knowing their neighbors, to livable neighborhoods. And lastly, citizenship, from entitlement to someone who's an empowered participant in social change. So next slide, please. That's the last slide, and I think I did it in reasonable time.
Yes,
You're
you
welcome.
did a great time, David. Thank you so much. Quick question for you. You mentioned that you were able to track that this behavior lasted longer term.
Yes.
What data did you collect? We have a question from a member of the audience.
Yes. Well, we had 5 cities that had that hired us, and were very eager to find out if their investment was working. So they did longitudinal studies after the program. But the most substantial piece of research was a 2-year longitudinal study done by a university that tracked the people who went through the program and a control group. And what they found was that 21 behaviors were sustained 2 years later. 3 were not sustained, and 4 new ones were added. It's a study by the University of Leiden. It's on our website, empowermentinstitute.net. And you can go right to the research section where it has all the studies, including that one, and all the city studies. empowermentinstitute.net will get you that.
And so when they do those longitudinal studies, is that looking at the particular indicators that you have identified, you know, the bills for electricity, the water use? So it's actually looking at those folks' bills a year later, 2 years later, and so on.
Well, what we had, fortunately, in the Netherlands, unlike which is one of the 21 countries that worked with this, they actually had all the hard data. In the U.S., we weren't able to get all that data, but in the Netherlands, they had all that hard data. Yes, so they were able to look at both the actions that were indicated that were taken, what people said they were doing afterwards, as well as the bills in this case. We weren't able to get that quality of data in the U.S. because we weren't able to track the utility bills. But in there, they have gas, they have electricity, they have water, they have everything metered. So they were able to actually do this with very hard data.
And you also mentioned that there's a financial savings of about $250 on average. I believe that's per year on average for all the measures that the average household adopted. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's what we found. And what was also interesting, Marion, again, for the people that are working in the area of energy efficiency, was we didn't put any special emphasis on energy efficiency. And what we're now paying attention to is when you put emphasis on that, can you actually increase the results, particularly the energy efficiency results, the savings? That's a new area for us to start exploring. But the money savings was pretty solid across the board, and sometimes it went as high as $400 or $500, sometimes as low as $100, $150, depending upon the utility company and where they were located.
Great. Well, thank you so much, David. We're going to move on to Alex, who's going to be talking without slides, modern miracle here. So, David, thanks. And just for folks on the line, if you have questions, please just put them into that question box and that little bar at the side of your screen, and I'll be trying to answer them as we go. And we'll also have some Q&A at the very end for all panelists. So just keep the questions coming. Alex, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, Mary, can you hear me just fine?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, great. Well, thanks again, everybody, and thank you, David, for that presentation. That just is piggybacking nice off of what you just talked about, which is very, very valuable. I am coming to you guys today. Currently, I work for the DC project. I'm going to let Max go ahead and talk a little bit more about our organization, but I'm really coming at this call with a perspective from working on Barack Obama's presidential campaign and a couple other campaigns previous to my work here, giving me a perspective on kind of political organizing and organizing especially rooted in field campaigns, putting a hard emphasis on boots on the ground, tactics and kind of techniques that have been and kind of important things to remember when doing that will be helpful no matter whether in the political sphere or outside of that. Just real quick, I do want to give a little more depth of personal intro, just so you know kind of where I'm coming from and the lens that I have, because a part of this conversation I want to have with everybody is the types of folks that are organizing in the political realm, especially in the field, where we oftentimes come from. We come from household organizers, a school teacher and a social worker, parents that both are head of their respective unions at the school and at the state level. My sister and brother-in-law both organized in New Orleans. My other brother is an organizer here in D.C. So really to give you an understanding that, not whether it be politics or otherwise, there's a reverence that I have just from day one of people power and kind of how to insert that people power no matter whether it be for electing a president or working on energy efficiency. I personally spent 19 months organizing for Barack Obama in the field. One that had a mantra that rang true from top to bottom of the operation of respecting everyone's contribution, being able to empower everybody to own the process and own our outcomes so you can increase your capacity, and being able to include every single person that wanted to be included. So after that 19 months and traveling all around the country to organize, I spent another month doing a runoff race for Jim Martin in Georgia after the 2008 election. I learned some valuable lessons there, and then finally spent a year building Organizing for America over at the DNC, based here in D.C., but in charge of 7 southern states. Really, it's the operation of political and field operation for the Democratic Party, kind of translating a lot of those lessons learned to the campaign and this new era of political organizing into the current political atmosphere. And again, on the campaign, I spent a time in a variety of states and cities that really taught me and woke me up to just how many people in this country are, in communities are desperate for change and desperate for a chance to realize a dream that they've been told for so long would come to them. And so that really reinforces the idea of people power as a part of organizing. Specifically, I want to talk about 2 examples and experiences that I had that kind of highlight what we did and how, whether it be for politics or otherwise, you can use on-the-ground tactics to really get your message across and get outcomes achieved. My experience in South Carolina and Georgia were really formative. And before I dive into those 2 experiences and give you some examples, I wanted to give a quick overview of what I see as kind of the 4 main points of political organizing that can be taken away for any type of organizing that's done. First being grass-top power mapping. Second being relationship-based community organizing. Third being using online tools to scale your work. And fourth, a creative media strategy. So on grass-top power mapping, what that really means, and the way I look at that is, going into any community or working with your own community, a very first step to look at is what resources do you already have at your disposal? What power is already there in your community that would be interested in what you are trying to achieve? And so a lot of the operations that sprung up to state for the Obama campaign spent a lot of time on talking to those leaders, not only political leaders, but community-based organizational leaders, traditional leaders of all sorts in the religious community, et cetera, to kind of figure out how their interests play into the overall vision for the campaign that you're trying to run or put out there. That's second, then coupled with the relationship-based community organizing. And really that's something that David did a great job of kind of highlighting the importance of having community groups that can reinforce the work that they do and reinforce each other when they're trying to go for some sort of goal. And this is where a lot of my work came in the field, focused on building what we call Obama teams during the campaign of citizens who, many of which had never been part of politics before, but had got a chance to have a one-on-one conversation with somebody who was able to connect the vision of the campaign to their vision of how they want to see the world work, and give them a chance to figure out how they can be plugged in, no matter how much time, a lot or little, they've had to the campaign, so that it was a valuable contribution, and that was a contribution that could be tracked and celebrated along the way. So that was a big key part. The third part of using online tools to scale your work, that kind of has three parts within itself. Data tracking, obviously something that we always said on the campaign when you're doing a field campaign was, well, it's great if you go out and pass out 100 flyers, but if you don't know who you pass them out to or who you talk to, the work never really happens. So being able to track that and using online tools to do so, using online to make your information about your project or your campaign going viral. Obviously, that was really through YouTube, through emails, through all sorts of other methods online was the way that we spread a lot of information. And thirdly, at-home tools, so that people could really participate in your project, in your campaign, no matter where they were. If they weren't able to come to an office, or your campaign or organization isn't able to have a bunch of physical locations, you're able to get people to take the interest in their campaign and make it into actual action from their home. Fourth, then, like I said, was media strategy, which is oftentimes kind of glossed over or forgotten about, but it's really an important component to any strategy that's done on the ground, is being able to have what we said was air cover, so that when individual conversations are being had between a supporter or a non-supporter, or a potential activist and a current activist, that actual conversation relationship being built is the most important thing that can happen. But you can multiply that effect simply by getting stories written about that experience, getting stories written about those very people making that happen. So being able to couple traditional outreach to TV and newspaper and other outlets to be able to tell that story for you can multiply the work you're doing on the ground already and tracking on a day-to-day basis with field organizers and volunteers. So all that leads me to kind of give you the specific examples of my own experience really quickly here. Like I said, in South Carolina, that was back in a long time ago. The end of 2007, beginning of 2008 was the Democratic primary, where the primary base was mainly composed of African-American voters in a state with notoriously low turnout rates, and it was a state in a political climate that was very used to organizations and political campaigns coming in and taking advantage of that voting block, basically not taking folks into consideration as voters or individual folks who had something to contribute, but instead just as kind of numbers that could be paid off to vote one way or another. And that was in the form of direct voters and also volunteers just being paid to hand out leaflets and not any sort of relationship with the campaign other than it meant some sort of money being being given and had nothing to do with the outcome of what the campaign was going to bring. So at the beginning of that, when I got down to South Carolina, in that climate, with Barack Obama being a guy that no one can pronounce his name at the time during the primaries, there was about a 10% support rate. And for, this is a very important step to this campaign winning. And over the long haul, I was there to be able to see that 10% support rate going from that number to a landslide victory in January of 2008. And this was long before the Boku Bucks were coming in for the general election, before everybody kind of knew Barack Obama's name. And so that was all really focused and done by a field operation that I was, firsthand helped to orchestrate, that focused on shifting those attitudes of Barack Obama voter by voter, step by step. And this is a good example for smaller campaigns, smaller operations, because it was an operation that had a much smaller voting block than you would in a really big state at a general election. There was a clear kind of timeline that we needed to get certain results done, et cetera. And so these steps I'm talking about really kind of comprised the following. First was hiring a core group of strong, talented organizers, many of which were first-time organizers but had a passion for the work that was going to be done, to spend a concentrated period of time focusing on building relationships with community members so that it could build a committed infrastructure of people, a human infrastructure that was going to be able to actually run the campaign. And so in that translated to finding individual leaders to form their own Obama teams, as we called them. It consisted of people with different roles. Each member of that team with these different roles then together own their own what we called turf, that they were able to kind of say, I know the number of voters I need to get on election day, and everything I do from now to election day is about building our capacity and getting those voters. We then translated that kind of consistent, strong, committed infrastructure to the actual actions that it was going to take to reach these voters. So consistent, high-volume phone calling from targeted lists for volunteer teams, as I described before. Those lists coming from data purchased from consumer data to actual data in the Democratic coffers of former voters, et cetera, to kind of figure out who the best possible supporters are, and then being able to follow up those people and have a continuous conversation. Taking that conversation then from the phone to the door, and being able to go door-to-door canvassing with specific targeted lists and having that same conversation. Those conversations, the kind of first steps, were translated to then getting folks to attend neighborhood house meetings, which is something that David actually talked about, which is great in the previous presentation. But a big part of it was not just having a primary conversation, but getting to have that secondary and tertiary conversation in a comfortable setting with, as a neighbor, your own neighbor telling you why they're going to vote for Barack Obama, why they're going to volunteer for Barack Obama, and getting that commitment to be tracked there afterward, so the organizers and these Obama teams could follow up and carry people all the way down to turning that committed vote into an actual vote, when then running a whole get out the vote operation on election day, and hopefully getting those people to be volunteers themselves. That whole process was about taking one specific person saying, yes, I like this guy, or I will vote for this guy, and exponentially increasing your outreach is what all this is about. Is that exponential growth and going to scale with what you want to try to do. And finally, all that is wrapped up in the fact that you have to track every single one of those conversations, and it has to be something that people know actually happens, so you can follow up. I was able to kind of personally take that to Georgia during the general election. I ran this operation in Georgia for the general election model, but really sunk it up well with a well-orchestrated communications and new media plan that only enhanced that work that was happening on the ground. And what I was able to do is get people to focus on a strategy that was all kind of the one and the same, but we're able to empower folks through these techniques to own the tactics for how they're going to reach there. So our strategy was to register a bunch of voters, because if the political climate had changed and we needed more people on the rolls to vote for Barack Obama, we focused on voter registration. That was the strategy. What the tactics were varied from place to place, whether it was urban, rural, black, white, et cetera, and so therefore had to ask and had to demand of the volunteers and organizers to figure that out on their own. And that kind of relationship where you empower others to have a structure to do that allowed us to register 220,000 people, blowing our goal out of the water of 100,000. And while we didn't get to win that state, the political climate didn't change. We definitely, our piece of the puzzle there worked because we kind of committed to the strategy. I've got some other examples, but for the interest of time, I think the only thing I'll say about kind of when this doesn't work and when to think about how you have to take other considerations. My experience in the Martin campaign, which was a month-long campaign, didn't have a lot of time to build those relationships around a shared narrative about why this is so important right now to change the country or the state, et cetera. meant that people weren't as committed as they needed to be in order to have the infrastructure size that we needed to have the same sort of level operation. Also, I've seen in other campaigns and experiences where if leadership doesn't commit to this type of strategy where you build capacity first and translate that into outcomes later, and kind of gives up along the way, then you'll never get to see this going to scale as I talked about before, which is frankly what we all try to go for and achieve. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind as well. But with that, Marion, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Great presentation. And I have a question. I worked in a bunch of nonprofits, and it's often, it often is a net drain on time to engage volunteers if you don't do it right. And it sounds like, you're engaging hundreds of volunteers to do all this active outreach, and we're talking about local governments who are looking to start new programs. And is there any, what do they need to have in place to make a volunteer-based program successful? It doesn't sound like it's easy. Do you need to get someone who knows how to do the volunteer organizing? Is it, I don't know, the online tool to actually manage everyone? Like what factors have to be in place to make it work? Because I can also imagine putting a ton of time into organizing volunteers and then not have kind of the staff and management capacity to keep it together and to really make the most of it.
Oh, sure. And I think a lot of your points are all things you eventually want to have. But I think the first place to start, honestly, when you're, is with the kind of the grass tops or community-based organizations that already exist in communities that actually have a lot of this infrastructure available and have the relationships already built. Not, I think I described an experience that had a lot to do with spending time building from scratch whole groups of people and a whole operation. But I mean, that's kind of a false, I think, picture, because a lot of that infrastructure really came from organizations that already existed, whether it be for people who cared about specific policies that they saw this, president being the venue to be able to pass, or it be, the faith community that was really behind Barack Obama at the time as president. That those are the folks that we really were able to go to first and have that conversation to figure out and map out what potential is there. I think that's the first and foremost, most important basic thing you could do. I think from there, I think it really is about figuring out what are simple ways that you're going to translate your message about what needs to happen now versus what needs to happen later, having clear communication channels, and that can be in the form of online tools that us as an organization here have really focused on translating from political world to the nonprofit world that are easy, accessible, oftentimes free. And just very simple tools allow you to kind of figure out where you're going from step day one to day two are the most basic things that you would need. Great.
Thanks, Alex. And I just want to remind everyone that there is a case study on the DC Projects program in DC, Weatherize DC, in the Driving Demand report. So that's at drivingdemand.lbl.gov. And that walks through some of the stats and some of the strategy for how these tools have been applied in DC to energy projects. So thank you so much, Alex. And we'll move on to Gabrielle. Let's see if I can unmute you. Can you see if you can be heard, Gabrielle?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Great. Yep.
Okay.
Great. So
great.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity to present on the Vermont Community Energy Mobilization Project, also known as VSEM, and yes, we need to change the name. My name is Gabrielle Stebbins. I'm Community Energy and Renewables Program Manager with Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, also known as VEIC. VEIC is a nonprofit in Vermont that manages the state energy efficiency utility. So first, a little bit about the program context. We already have a statewide energy efficiency retrofit program. So in many ways, this was sort of an additional program element to our pre-existing energy efficiency retrofit program. There were a few pieces that really created the environment in which VSEM could be launched. One was that the summer of 2008, we had very high fuel prices. Another is that Efficiency Vermont for many years had been receiving requests from many state and local town energy committees to provide some sort of program in which volunteers, such as town energy groups, could really make real energy savings and not necessarily just hand out flyers at a conference or at an energy booth. So we've got a lot of volunteerism, and there was repeated requests for a program to be designed for them to sort of leverage what we could provide with their energy. There was also a fair amount of legislative support. It was an election year with the high fuel prices and the volunteerism, combined with a recent market research study that we did for our Home Performance with Energy Star retrofit program, also known as HIPWES. That research report basically said that the best way to get people to move forward with retrofits was word of mouth. We had broad program goals, and I mention this because our program goals were different than what a lot of the listeners on this webinar have for program goals. Our program was to develop programs so volunteers could immediately assist neighbors with energy savings, and as a result, our tracking was different than I think potentially what you guys may be trying to track. Additionally, it was only a 2-month period from program design to implementation. That also had some tracking issues, and I would encourage, to the extent that you can think a little bit about what you want to track beforehand. It's far easier than hiring an intern later to input data after the fact. Finally, the VSEM project was really more of a neighbor-to-neighbor, not so much a door-to-door project. Vermont's pretty geographically spread out, and neighbor-to-neighbor is a lot more relevant for Vermont. Next slide, please. About the program design, I preferred David's image of the dandelion seeds blowing out, but essentially we had Efficiency Vermont, which designed the program, developed materials, of which there were 16 different program forms. It was very paper heavy. Trained volunteers, assisted local coordinators, paid for and tracked energy efficiency measures and savings, also wrote up a final report and has done repeated follow-up with the home participants, the people who had these home visits. The local coordinator was responsible for recruiting volunteers and participants, for scheduling home visits, for managing inventory. But going back to what both the previous speakers have commented on, in many ways, Efficiency Vermont used the local coordinator and the local town energy group as for their great leverage, in the sense that they were the ones that really provided the credibility. They were the ones that provided, and in many ways, were the local opinion leaders. If you have your town manager signing up to do some home visits, it just gives the impact of that home visit so much more strength. And they were also the ones that really developed the community buy-in and had the pre-existing relationships, which is why we could roll out this program in 2 months. Really quickly, the home visit concept is that volunteers would go into a home, immediately install, or direct install as the industry lingo refers to it, compact fluorescent light bulbs, water efficiency measures, pipe insulation, hot water tank wraps, and programmable thermostats. There would also be a brief walk through the home in which they would look at the attic, the basement. Is there attic hatch insulation? Is the basement a dirt floor? And then the most important part was the kitchen table conversation. Again, this is where you develop that support and the trust in the program. Part of that kitchen table conversation was talking about what had been installed and what the volunteer found as they walked through the participant's home. But the bulk of the conversation was crunching through bills, energy bills, and getting a sense of the square footage of the home and the energy usage, and comparing that to the Vermont average and saying, hey, you only have 2 people living in this X square foot home, but you're using so much for your oil. Potentially you've got a savings here. And the final part of that kitchen table conversation was looking at your energy use. We suggest these next steps. These might be where you could really find more comfort addressing mold issues or just saving energy and money. Next slide, please. Since this presentation is about driving demand, first I have the little picture of the leaf, again thinking about the dandelion seeds, spreading the word. Efficiency Vermont provided a program, but really spreading the word rested with the town coordinator. In terms of your message needs to be really clear. You don't want different customers getting different messages. But it also should be flexible. We have worked with over about 15 groups, and our groups had different messages. Some of the town energy groups wanted to provide a rounder, more holistic, sustainable message. So our message needed to be able to be tweaked to fit their needs and address what would help them with their community buy-in. we developed every outreach tool we could imagine, from public service announcements to calendar listings to case studies, to putting together a list of what the organizations were that we knew of in the area, faith-based, environmental, human resource, and educational, so that there was the leveraging and meeting with other organizations of like mind and spreading outreach that way as well. VSEM did not use paid advertising, but if I had had the funding, I would certainly have offered that to my groups. In terms of driving demand, VSEM tried to employ all of these elements. In terms of modeling success, we had case studies. We also had open homes, which is sort of a newfangled twist on a Tupperware party, so that, you know, once a month someone in your neighborhood or someone in your town could open their home and show you what a retrofit looked like. How did their bill change? Are they much more comfortable? Is the mold problem gone? Engaging community leaders. Again, most of our coordinators were community leaders, so that helped. Engaging the participant. The volunteer visitor did not just go in the home and install everything. It was required, as much as possible, given that it's volunteers, that the home participant really walk through the home with the volunteer. And we had, as part of our training, that the volunteer could frame their comments. By the way, did you know, homeowner, that by me installing this CFL, you will see X amount of savings? In terms of commitment, we did have the home participants sign a pledge, and we did follow up in a survey later to find out what additional steps they had taken. Normative messaging, comparison to others, and feedback, all of those pieces were based in terms of looking at the overall household energy use and then letting them know what the Vermont average was. And the repetition of that clear but flexible message started with the initial announcement in the town local newspaper and went through the home visitor and then all the way back to Efficiency Vermont when we followed up with customers. Next slide, please. In terms of tracking, as I mentioned, it depends on what your goals are. Obviously, we tracked our energy savings. We tracked our customer site information. We also did track how many times we've communicated with the customer. What we found was the more that you follow up without irritating them, the more you will see your retrofits. But I do not suggest, you know, once a month, but, you know, potentially once every 6 or 7 months. Customer feedback, we followed up with a survey. Why did they move forward? Was it saving energy, saving money? Was it comfort? Was it mold? And why didn't they move forward? There are different answers to these two questions, why they did and why they didn't. And it's best to try and model your program so that you're addressing both why they might move forward and why they might not. And then also in terms of our survey, to get a sense of why they moved forward and what parts of our program helped them, we asked them, please rank our program elements according to what was most helpful for you. Was it our incentives? Was it the kitchen table conversation? Was it explaining what would be your best next step? I do think you guys may have, you know, it can be a challenge to create a clear message, but then to try and track what motivates different customers differently, you would have to actually roll out the program slightly differently. And that could be a challenge. We addressed that in VSEM by providing the same program, but then again asking the participants to rank which program elements moved them the most. Database flexibility, I would certainly encourage looking at online resources, but your database flexibility will also determine what and how easily you can track things. And in terms of the time lag, this is critical. You could have a great program, and if you're trying to find out what the response is, you need to give it some time. It can't be that you roll out a program and 2 months later you're expecting retrofits. It takes people a while to actually think about installing an $8,000 to $10,000 home improvement project. It requires a lot of looking at different budgeting, conversations with your partners, so there's usually a time lag that we've witnessed. Next slide, please. Findings and results. In terms of the table, if you take a look at number of completed and in progress home performance with Energy Star retrofits, you'll see that there are different percentage amounts. Overall, we have 50 completed and in progress projects resulting from the VSEM program. In 2009, that means that 5.7% of the homes that received a visit in 2009 ended up moving forward with a retrofit. In 2010, 3.4% so far of the homes that have moved that had a retrofit that had a visit moved forward with a retrofit. And you'll see that time lag again right there. It's also helpful to note that overall, the last couple of years, Home Performance with Energy Star has seen about 500 projects move forward. So 50 over 500 is not insignificant. Findings and results, it was really helpful for us to try to sit down, even though we were rolling it out in 2 months, and really plan what we were hoping to achieve. This will help you with your tracking. And then to go back again and again and see what's working and tweak it. Since energy costs are manageable, you do need some community buy-in, or at least energy costs are manageable by a lot of the people who have $8,000 to $10,000 to do a retrofit. In terms of outreach, we offered our local coordinators everything we could think of, but then they should use what fits. We had one fellow who in January would drive around with a door hanger and look at which roofs had the most ice. In terms of social behavior, try everything on and then survey what works. In terms of making the project results public and real time, I found it really helpful once you have that community buy-in to put out a big kiosk in front of Town Hall. Let the community know what the results are, what's improving, what's working. Neighbor to neighbor works. Efficiency Vermont did follow up with a survey, and what we found was that 37% of the people who had had a home visit had never heard of Efficiency Vermont. So clearly going through neighbors, we're targeting an audience in the community that we hadn't actually been able to reach. And finally, follow up as much as you can. Check in with the customer, make sure you're not going to irritate them. But that has helped with our retrofit rate. Yes, please, next slide. Reasons for not moving forward, I won't read this off to you, but these were from highest to lowest, the reasons why people chose not to move forward. And if you can try and think about why they didn't move forward and how you can design your project to follow up with them, that might help address why they're slowing down and not moving forward. Thank you.
Gabrielle, thank you so much. That was really helpful. 2 quick questions for you. One is, are there any liability concerns with having volunteers go into homes and do pipe wraps or install thermostats?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why we actually are probably not going to do tank wraps next year. And we only did programmable thermostats the first year. A couple of thoughts on that. We did have insurance out for all volunteers. Part of our training was very much do not install anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. Part of our training was showing, where flue pipes are, and if they're located within a certain number of inches from your pipe insulation, do not install it there. But yes, there are several elements there. Also, in terms of if you do install a tank wrap jacket, you need to put new warning signs on the outside. So it can become logistically a little bit of a headache, both in terms of the training and in terms of the materials. Making sure you have the stickers for the tank wraps, all of that. So to the extent that you can install the easier items, you'll make your program move a little bit more easily.
Great. And one last question.
Actually,
the training that, go ahead.
The other piece is we did have on the home intake form, home participants had to sign both a pledge, but then they also had to sign that they couldn't sue us or the home visitor.
Great. In terms of the training you provide to volunteers, who created that curriculum and who administered it? Was that all Efficiency Vermont, and is that a curriculum available somewhere?
Yes, and I can certainly provide that to you if that would be helpful.
That would be great. I think lots of folks would love to see that. And in fact, maybe what I'll do is, if I can get that from you, I can post that onto the drivingdemand.lbl.gov website for everyone. Does
Sure.
that sound okay?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. So we're going to go to our last speaker, Max Harper from DC Project. He's going to go through some of the metrics and methodologies to think through as you're designing and implementing your programs. Max, are you there?
I'm here.
Great. Take it away.
Yep. Hi, everybody. My name is Max Harper, and I have the pleasure of being a co-founder of the DC Project, a nonprofit that we, a number of former Obama organizers and beta folks and online folks that came off the Obama presidential campaign in 2008, set up this nonprofit out in DC with the goal of enabling communities, disadvantaged communities, opportunity in the clean energy economy. I currently act as the program director of Weatherize DC, where we've been working day in and day out for just over a year now, trying to bring hope and change to the retrofit industry. Next, this is the slide here. So this slide is a diagram kind of our program design. The Weatherize DC program is kind of a retrofit program for the most part in its entirety, minus direct access to rebates or financing. We mobilize volunteers and homeowners to get homeowners to invest in weatherization. We work with contractors, developing contractors to do that work, and we work with workforce development partners to supply workers recently trained out of backgrounds of poverty or otherwise disadvantaged situations through a community workforce agreement to be able to do the work that we supply. The diagram before you shows kind of the entire confluence of the overall system. What we're going to be focusing on today is marked in color, and it's what we have come to term the weatherization pathway, which is taking a homeowner from their initial targeting and outreach and engagement, and moving them all the way through the retrofit process there in green, and finally to what we call feedback, where we're tracking qualitative and quantitative outcomes and outputs from their experience and re-engaging them in the engagement process. So we'll go ahead to the next slide, please. So this is, there's a lot going on here. I understand, and I invite you to kind of drill into this and the next couple of slides when you get a chance afterwards. I'll kind of help for the next few slides kind of focus your attention on a few areas. So this is that weatherization pathway that I was describing just before, and it goes from left to right. And what we've got is essentially these discrete steps. We've kind of divided up the engagement process into some discrete steps, which enable tactical communication and data design. At any given time in our office, you'll see this up on the wall, or up on a whiteboard, and we've got sticky notes in every different location that are color-coded, and they mean all kinds of different things. What's really important about kind of this systems methodology is that it enables us, by tracking people's progress through these discrete steps, to track conversion rates and lag time, so we can kind of keep tabs on the system dynamics that we're experiencing. And from left to right, you see kind of the in the targeting purple column and the outreach red column, the different channels by which we're doing outreach. The three main entry points into our engagement system, which would be direct data entry off of a in-person or on-the-ground event, a phone call where they've called in, or sign up onto our website, and through our CRM, we now start engaging them through a variety of tactics. This engagement low and engagement high can kind of be thought of together, but we've subdivided it because we've recognized that there's some folks that aren't ready to attend a house meeting and get into a peer-pressured room and kind of commit to weatherization. They might want to take it a little more slowly, so we have an engagement level for them. So all the tactics will be placed sort of in there around engagement low or engagement high, and those tactics include all of these neighbor-to-neighbor or door-to-door tactics that we've been talking about: canvases, home energy meetings, volunteer walkthroughs, community energy meetings, a variety of things. And we're not going to focus too much on all of the tactics, but more on the methodology by which we track people's progress through this. Ultimately, just an important marcation here is the distinction between the yellow and the green. For us, that's the commitment point. This is someone essentially pledging and committing and saying, I'm interested in not only getting an audit, but ultimately weatherizing at some price range that we've been able to communicate to them. At that point, they become a lead. they go through the weatherization process, we track their progress through that through a collaborative data system with our partner contractors, and then ultimately follow up with them and have the feedback stage there where we sort of see what their experience is like and re-engage them. Underneath you see the analytics section. It gives you an idea, of people's progress through what we're able to track and what we're focused on at any given stage. And so if we track somebody from yellow to, from the orange section to the green section, that's how good are we at these different tactics? How engaging are we at house energy meetings? We're just focused on the step from red to orange. We're tracking how good was our outreach, how good are our materials. Could we have written a better email? Could we have written a better blog post? Those kind of things. And then at the very bottom there, a line across the entire bottom that's tracking people that we've targeted and seeing how if they were good targets, if we did good with the data targeting and if they ultimately succeeded through. Another piece that's in here, which we're not going to really talk about, is the use of an energy tracker, which was on there, but okay, we'll skip ahead here. So metrics, go ahead on the next slide there.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, no worries here. So, so we're going to show a couple examples of how we're building metrics around this kind of template for our what you've got here is an example of one stream of tactics targeting through retrofit. And this one is mass mobilization, so that we're going to focus on a neighborhood canvas, which will lead to people going to a home energy meeting, which will lead to leads generated, ultimately them moving through the process of retrofit and hopefully becoming a referrer. So looking from left to right in the purple column, we've got a targeted universe, our full universe of targeted homeowners. For example, is 40,000, and we've targeted them by some publicly available data, house age, block level energy use data, home ownership, and then some purchase consumer data, maybe heating type, mortgage status, etc. And we've kind of whittled down a targeted universe, and it's from that targeted universe that we're going to go knock on doors. So then we're going to look at the red column, and we're doing our outreach. This is us going and knocking on that targeted list, knocking on a select group of doors, and what we're tracking is the outcomes of that tactic. So we're tracking the number of attempts, which means door knocks, the number of contacts, which means conversations, and we're asking them. We have our canvassers, tweaking the script and asking them in this case. To go to a home energy meeting in their neighbor, hosted by their neighbor. And then we're tracking the number of people that say yes to it and looking at that contacts to house meeting yes conversion rate. And we're tracking a few other things along the way. You can kind of read through them. I want to point your attention to just a couple of things. It's important to be tracking the date of all of these things and, because you want to be keeping track of the lag times, and you want to keep track of the script. What script were you using? And could you have been using a better script? And if you try a new script, how are you able to compare script A to script B? Did script B work better? And then some context notes. So then now we've got, we're having them go to the home energy meeting. In between those steps, I wasn't able to fit it, but you would have phone banking and emails, for RSVPs. So we would have a list of people that have RSVP'd, and we're going to track now at the meeting with a sign-in sheet how many people are attending, what are the number of no-shows, what's our flake rate, how many said they would show up but didn't. And then we're tracking the same kind of things as the canvas, the scripts and the date, maybe making notes of improvement areas so we can constantly improve and adapt our techniques. And ultimately, we're tracking our conversion rate. How are we doing at this type of house meeting? Was it a successful house meeting? Would it have been better if we, approached it in a different way? So we've got our conversion rate there, and then they would go on and go into the those that committed to weatherizing, we would then track them through the retrofit work, much in the way that you heard in the previous presentation. And let's go to the next slide.
Can I just interrupt for a second? What is the source of the block level energy use data? Where do you get that from?
I believe that actually comes from the census. I could double check with our data associate, but that was my understanding.
Okay, and then on the consumer data, oh, go ahead.
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, on the consumer data, you look at mortgage status. What are you inferring from mortgage status in that case?
Yeah, so we put a couple data points in there, and we did some analytics over our 6-month pilot, and we found a couple of things, and we found a number of other things that were in there. We decided not to put them all in there, partly because of statistical significance at this point. We have some hunches, but the mortgage status, I think, we see it potentially being something very useful in a, well, we saw it being very useful in a PACE-enabled environment, and potentially for pre-qualification. So, yeah, I think that's partly why that's probably why that's on there.
So we just have a few more minutes. So Max, just one thing. We just have a few more minutes, and I'm thinking that this slide is actually going to be a good one to talk about just in a couple minutes as you close up. Is that okay? We just have like 5 more minutes till the webinar is over.
Sure. Yeah, the last slide, when you guys go back to it, it's about the way we work one-on-one with GrassTop's leaders, as Alex earlier kind of spoke about on the campaign. There's a variety of what we've kind of deemed core metrics that are listed here. I want to point out just a couple that are significant. One that's really significant and not often talked about is the referral rate. And for us, we spend a lot of time kind of experimenting or exploring how we can increase the referral rate, which is the number of folks that have done a retrofit and are now out organizing for us or hosting energy meetings in their weatherized home. And I think that's, to us, a marker of long-term sustainability and also a mark of reaching the tipping point. These are the choir that you preach to. We're trying to figure out how to make them sing, as was mentioned earlier. I could go into any one of these in sort of a question. I think another one that I want to talk about is long-term volunteers. And Marion, you had mentioned earlier in a question how challenging it might be to engage volunteers, and it might be the cost-benefit analysis might not work out. We spend quite a bit of our time in looking at the ways we can build long-term engagement for volunteers. And one of the things that we've been experimenting with and had a lot of success is training volunteers and doing those volunteer home energy assessments, those kind of clipboard audits, if you will. And it's been showing a lot of success for us in that it gives the volunteer something else to do other than knock on doors and make phone calls. And it engages them, it makes them feel empowered, and as they're learning through this experience. And they get a T-shirt and they get a special packet, and so that's a key thing for long-term stability, because ultimately, our vision is to see, ideally, weatherized DC be able to step out of the picture and see the early adopters out there organizing in the community to get the early majority moving. So. If people have some other questions about the core metrics and want to pick out a few more, we can do that in questions. Do you think, Marion, we want to take a look at another slide?
Yeah, let's see.
One example.
Do we have another one?
Oh, go ahead. There's one example on the next page, just a tangible. These are some of the challenges that we found. I invite you to take a look at some of those. The one in the middle has been most notable for us in that the amount of demand that we generated really outstretched the capacity of our partner contractor, and that's something I think to be to a lot of programs about to mobilize a lot of demand is just making sure contractor capacity, not just being able to do the installation work, but most specifically to be able to manage the amount of audits, phone calls, back office sales management and project management. So I would put that out as a warning, good lesson learned for us. And the next slide, I think, the next slide is just next slide is a little bit about what we're doing currently. We've got a program set up to do national training and technical assistance, a combination of consultation, assisting in kind of program design, field design, strategy, and tactics, kind of touching on these three areas of looking at the outreach engagement, making sure that the grassroots organizing and the mass organizing strategies are possible or how they could be possible in a given location. The program design, making sure that the systems and relationships are enabled to enable organizing strategies and to be able to enable a lot of the data tracking. For us, it's all under one roof, so we have a lot more control. Through conversations with some of our initial partners on the TNTA front, we found that that can be a bit more challenging once the org structure gets more spread out. And then thirdly, the customized data tools and tactical systems. We've been integrating, we've been building and integrating a lot of data tools into kind of a single streamlined system to, as Alex said, take kind of a lot of the political organizing tools and make them powerful in organizing in the energy space, the home energy space. So in the next slide. For you. Oh, sure. The next, question? The next slide is actually the last slide, but.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just go there. So for the house meetings that you guys organized, is there a script that you found works well for that? Is there, I don't know, a series of points you need to make or a way of running it that's been really effective in your experience?
Yeah, I think we've found a variety of what we deem at this point best practices for us, and one of them that's really notable is being able to have an advocate there, having a homeowner that's gone through the experience, potentially an energy auditor be there as well. Having an energy auditor there, really important for fielding a lot of the technical questions that are inevitable in this space, and having an experienced homeowner just be able to talk about their personal experience and provide that element of, to a degree, peer pressure. But I think it's important to distinguish between peer pressure and trust. And I think so having the person that can be trusted, their trusted neighbor, be able to talk about the importance of this stuff, as opposed to a business who stands to profit, is an important part. Additionally, we've also seen good success with having it happen in a weatherized home. Another thing is being able to have samples of energy audit or audit reports and estimates. So those things aren't mythical. Those things are very tangible. You can pass them around. You can look at them. It looks just like an estimate you might get on some other projects, and people can see the actual dollar figures right there on an invoice, and it doesn't look like we're just talking about false promises or something.
Great. So I just want to let everyone know that technically the webinar would end now, but we're going to continue with some questions. Feel free to leave if you need to. The webinars that are on your screen right now are upcoming webinars. The next Driving Demand webinar will be on November 9th, and it's on working with and learning from contractors. And that link you see at the bottom of the screen is where you can find both past webinars. The slides and audio for this presentation will be up there, and that's also where you register for these future webinars. So we'll just go forward with a few more questions for those of you who are interested in staying. So Max, we have a question here. Matt is saying that the whole process you're setting up sounds kind of bureaucratic. Does it really work? Is this something that a local government could really use, or when it's kind of presented all at once, it just seems kind of complicated and a lot of steps. So in your experience of actually using it on the ground, what's that like?
It's a great question. I mean, we have the ability. We recognize that we're in a unique place, being a nonprofit, and I think where it could be bureaucratic, we talk about data discipline to a degree, and just knowing the power of it. And for us, one of the key things is the data systems and the kind of protocols that surround it. And a lot of the data systems that we've been using are designed to easily facilitate data in, data out. And the survey instruments, like the sign-in sheets and the sign-out sheets, they're all systematized. When we go to our house meeting packet includes a script, it includes handouts, it includes a sign-in sheet, it includes sign-out sheet and sign-up sheets that people sign up with, and all that stuff is all easily facilitated because it's been systematized. And it's also, and Alex kind of points out that it comes off very natural in organizing, and we're looking for a kind of capturing kind of the organic organizing work that when people show up at a house meeting, we're gonna collect all the names, partly because we are building a community in very real terms, and we want to know who those people are and keep relationships with them. If one of those people at a house meeting says, "Oh, I'd love to host a house meeting," gosh, we want to make sure we record that and put them in the part of the system where we're going to follow up with them one-on-one.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. We at the lab here have looked at a ton of different programs, and it's surprising how frequently even the simplest things aren't tracked, like conversion rates, or if you try one strategy, what's the impact versus another strategy. So I think some form of collecting metrics like this is extremely important, and the way Max has laid it out is kind of like at all the different steps, what information can you collect? And I think thinking about it that way is really important. And then maybe you say, it's these 5 data points that's really going to define our success, and that's really all we have time to collect. Fine if that's the resources you have. But making sure you have these different metrics is really, really important. I think that Gabrielle from Efficiency Vermont also offered some really great survey information. What was in the way? What were the barriers that were getting between people going from this home energy visit to a full retrofit? Making sure you're talking to people and getting feedback and then adapting your programs over time is something that's really not done enough in these programs and can be fairly affordable if you do it kind of on whatever scale you can manage. One more question for Max. Do you have an in-house system that you developed to track all this information, or is it an off-the-shelf product that you're using?
We were using a variety of systems that we're now currently building into kind of one integrated system. The tools that we were using were largely adapted from campaigns. We had a field system known as the Voter Activation Network that's really useful for volunteer engagement and a lot of the canvassing and the phone banking side of things. We had an online CRM that was, for handling the online signups, the targeted and mass emails. We had an energy tracking system powered by EarthAid. We even just used Google Document for transferring the leads to and sharing those with the partner contractor and the pilot. And additionally, National Field, which was a volunteer management tool, which really facilitates almost a hierarchy/social network of your volunteers and tracks their input, their outputs, their experience, their ideas. That was built by a number of folks that had come off the Obama campaign as well, some compatriots of ours that really tried to simplify volunteer management on a mass and kind of distributed level. And we're currently integrating all of that stuff on a Salesforce platform that is built out to take advantage of organizing and enable organizing in the home energy space. So.
And Max, what's a CRM?
Oh, it's contact relations management system. So that's the system that allows you to basically manage the database of your contacts and relationships, and not just their names and contact information, but furthermore their interests, their interest levels, what groups they're affiliated with, and it allows you to parse through those areas and be able to say, oh, let's email that house meeting group up in the Palisades neighborhood. And we'll make a Palisades email that quickly goes out the day after a house meeting and says, thank you all for participating, in the Palisades home energy meeting. Those of you who didn't make it, you can, sign up here. Those of you who did, you can sign up here. Or like we're excited for you to move to the next step or that. So it enables you to kind of micro-target on the individual, or enables you to micro-target kind of your relationships and manage them in mass, so that you're able to make it not as, where it could become cumbersome and bureaucratic, it becomes more organic, natural, just relationship building on a larger level.
Great. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate all the presenters that were willing to share their time with us today. I think we'll end there. If anyone has questions they feel like were unanswered by this webinar that you need to contact one of the speakers and you don't have their contact information, you can feel free to email me. It's mcfuller@lbl.gov. And we really encourage you to check out the resources we have at drivingdemand.lbl.gov. A lot of these case studies are there. Future webinars, past webinars, trying to collect as much information on this topic in one place. And we, of course, welcome your feedback at any time on future webinars or how we can improve the webinars that the Department of Energy is offering. So thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.